Y'all, we could get everybody to sit down. It's 8 o'clock. We got a pretty long little deal to do this morning. It's 8 o'clock, and if we could get Dominic to ask a prayer for us. I got a message from Emory Donahue, who's going to be a little bit late. They put his dad in the hospital. And also, we're glad to have Nathan back. I don't know. I guess he's on the way. If y'all didn't know, our intern, him and a four-wheeler and a pine tree didn't get along. And he's been in Grady for 2 or 3 days, but he's out and doing as good as he can. But he's got some hearing problems and a couple of 3 bones in his neck that got kind of messed up when the pine tree whipped him. So we're glad he's back. But Dominic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's pray. Heavenly Father God, we love you. Thank you for this day, Lord. You just are so good to us. We pray for Representative Donahue's dad and pray that everything will go well in that situation. And as we convene here this morning to deliberate these important issues, Lord, just remind everybody in this room that we are all accountable to the same people, whether they're at the local, state, or federal level. We are all accountable to them in everything that we do, and make sure that we do it in a way that honors you and will do what's best for the people of Georgia. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thanks, sir. Well, I just saw him. Where's Jody Redden at?
He was right back there.
Jody is Senator Kelly Loeffler's new ag person for the state of Georgia. Jody, that was a smart move that she made.
She's his new senator.
And we appreciate you coming to the ag committee this morning. He's kind of a normal face around here anyhow, so I hate the big city of Berlin is doing without you this morning, but thank you for coming up here. There is a sign-up sheet or 12 down here on the front table. There's several new bills. House Bill 937 we debated for hours on end last year. If you do talk about 937, we're going to kind of hold it down to a time limit. Well, I'd love for all of you to be on a time limit because we got about 5 bills we need to do. Some people have called me and said they were going to be running a little late, but they wanted to be here to hear the debate on 937. So what we're going to do first is if Representative Meeks would do his, God, whatever it is. Seed development bill. It's pretty easy. So go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for members of the committee for the opportunity to bring to you this morning House Bill 894, working off of LC 441399, related to the Seed Development Commission. The Seed Development Commission is responsible for overseeing the foundation plant material that's produced here in Georgia. It's been in existence since 1959. In the 1980s, universities across the United States were given the opportunity to retain the rights of ownership of the intellectual property rights created by their scientists. So this is the organization that oversees the intellectual property rights for those breeding programs, which include peanuts, turfgrass, soybeans, small grains, blueberries, and horticulture. So what we're doing here is the current statute allows or directs the commission to organize every 2 years without the terms of the commission or its members being very clear. So what we've done here is in House Bill 894 is to lengthen the terms from the 2 years that is insinuated by the statute and then staggered those terms for the members. Currently, there are 2 members appointed by the governor, 1 member appointed by the lieutenant governor, 1 appointed by Speaker of the House. The Commissioner of Ag serves on the commission as well as the House and Senate Ag committees have the opportunity to appoint 1 individual as well. So what we're doing is we're starting with a 4-year term appointed by those by the governor, a 5-year term appointed by the, a 4-year term appointed by the governor and lieutenant governor, 5-year term appointed by the House and Senate Ag committees, and a 6-year term, a 6-year term by the House and Senate Ag committees. So we're giving them an opportunity to stagger those terms over a period of time instead of all of the terms ending at once. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the crux of the bill. Happy to yield for any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Representative Meeks?
Proper time, I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I make a motion, we approve.
Got a motion, second. Got seconds everywhere. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Vance. Where's Vance? This is House Bill 937. And y'all, like I said, we spent more time on this last year than the Ag Committee has ever spent on any single bill ever in 15 years that I know of. So, you know, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time rehashing stuff. We got members that are going to have to go to rules. So, Vance, go ahead, sir. Wait a minute, let me figure out which one. Is that it? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Just a real short history. Last session, study committee passed. That study committee was called Workforce Housing. It was created House Bill this is 937. It was House Resolution 591. We held 4 meetings of the study committee. We had Athens in September. October we were in Tifton. November we were in Dahlonega. And the last meeting was here in December, right here at the Capitol. We had people come from all different areas of the state to speak. Economic development, DCA. Matter of fact, we had 31 people. I think if you look in your folder, and thanks to Ms. Lee for putting the study committee report in there, you'll can take that and read it. It's a little lengthy, but it lists all the people that came and spoke with us, and very interesting. So, and we had a good crowds. We had about 50 show up in Athens, and 35 at each of the others. So we were well pleased. This bill that we're looking at today, House Bill 937, is a result of that study committee. If you look at it, we're asking lines 12 through 16, not to put any restrictions on private property rights as far as telling people what building product or material or construction practice to use. But if you're deciding to do that as a local entity, you can go down to item number 4 and you can present an amendment to the state standards. There's a 21-member advisory committee, of which is represented by local elected officials, has the largest voting block on that 21-member advisory committee. You can submit your amendments to them, and they can come back with a proposal of yes, it's good, and no, it's not, or no recommendation. But that gives that option of a local process. And is this mic cutting in and out? Is it just when I say the letter P, I got to figure out how not to use the letter P. All right, thanks, Representative Dominic. Anyway, if you'll look at that right quick on the first page, like I say, it asks not to put the limits on the materials or the construction practice of the product, but then it has those exemptions. Okay, I can't, okay. Anyway, it has those exemptions 1 through 6, and these are ones that were familiar last time. If it's an Historic Preservation Act, if it's a National Register of Historic Places, or if it is a landmark. And then item 4, which is a local process to amend the state code. And then 5 is manufactured housing. 6 is the National Flood Insurance Program. And then 6B is referring to HOAs. So that's pretty much the entire bill, Mr. Chairman, and I'm welcome to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. I didn't realize there was that many P's used in the alphabet, but
Yeah, I didn't either.
anyway, David said if you back up when you say P, it won't blister everybody's ears. I don't see any questions for you. Well, 27, Miss Darlene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. I want to make sure I understand. The bill references construction practices on line 13.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us an example of what an approved construction practice is in the state codes? I want to make sure I'm understanding. I'm not a builder.
Right.
And what's not approved? What type of construction?
I don't know if I can give you examples of what construction practices are. I'd have to pull the code and see which one they're using in there, but it has to do with how a roof is built on a house. And I'm not a builder either. It had to do with how a roof is built, how the framing is done, whether it's on a slab or a crawl space. Those are construction practices.
Okay, thank you.
Who is, good Lord, this thing lit up. Who is 9? All right, Matthew.
Morning, Representative.
Hey, Matthew. Representative.
So we've talked through this a lot, so I think you know exactly where I stand on this issue. But my only question really is references the great words of wisdom we heard this morning from Chaplain Arikia about doing the will of the people. And my question is, if we are tying the hands of their local elected officials, how are we not thwarting the will of the people?
Well, I guess, and you and I we have a difference of opinion there. I think item 4 completely unties the hands because local officials can go through a process to amend the code. It's just like we here today, we're thinking about laws that we would like to have on the books. So we, instead of just instituting a law, we go through a process and we present it to our other colleagues just as their amendments would be presented to the 21-member advisory council, and they'd make their recommendations. So therefore, I really don't see where their hands are tied. I guess my biggest concern is, when does somebody say, whoa, wait, let's stop and discuss private property rights? Because, in my opinion, are we eroding some of those private property rights? We've all been elected officials. I'm an ACCG alumnus. I was a commissioner in Harris County in the late 80s and understand completely about local control, but I've had people come up to me on issues sometimes and say, whoa, Vance, wait a minute, you're overreaching there a little bit. So are we overreaching? Do we want to protect those private property rights and let those consumers make those choices? Example, how many windows you can have on your house? I mean, should the government say you've got to have so many windows? I've got, on one end of my house, I've got one. I may have to knock a hole in there and put another one in there, but how far do we go? I just don't want to go too far, and at some point we need to have this discussion, I guess.
One other question. What kind of impact do you expect this to have along coastal areas and in floodplain areas in the state?
Well, if you look on item line 31, the National Flood Insurance Program, I think that would take care of that.
So, gotcha. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. This thing up here is lit up like a Christmas tree in July. If your question gets answered, just say okay. But thank you. 29, is that you, Jan?
That's me, Mr. Chairman. We talked about, you talked about the ability of local governments to offer an amendment to building design standards, but isn't it true that it only allows local building amendments or it seems to be written that this way in current law, that it's based solely on local climatic changes, geologic, topographic, or public safety factors.
I read that too, and I think, there again, it's kind of like guidelines on the legislature, what we want to draw up. And we go to legislative council, and they don't put their input in there. We draw up bills like we want. I think anything can be offered up. I can't guarantee what will be voted up or down at the advisory council at DCA, but I think any issue that's important to the community can be offered up to them. They don't have to give a recommendation. They don't have to give a up or down. They can actually have no recommendation.
And may I follow up? Would that not create a delay in folks trying to make an amendment so they can move forward with the development or building? I mean, it's not a quick process to amend.
No, it's not. They have 60 days. But there again, it's kind of like bills here. It takes a little while to get a bill going. I've been on this one since last year. So is that a delay? I don't know. But I'm happy to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Who's 16? That you, Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You asked a question a second ago, how far do we go? I think that's a perfect question for a local elected official to answer. I'm not sure at a bureaucrat at DCA is the appropriate one to answer the question. But my question for you is around lines 32 through 34. This is a carve out for HOAs. If I'm the mayor of Holly Springs, Georgia, and I'm in the middle of one of the fastest growing counties in Georgia, actually the fastest growing county in Georgia, and I'm trying to get around this, what's to keep me, and if your goal is affordable housing, and my only way of getting around this is to only approve HOA governed neighborhoods, which right now I'm just in love with my own HOA, I'm gonna tell you. Love those guys, if you're watching. I'll get to the grass when session is over. If your goal is affordable housing in all of this, isn't the unintended consequence here where municipalities and local governments are only going to be approving new developments for HOA governed neighborhoods, which also flies in the face of property rights? I mean, you can't even put a yard sign for my own campaign in my front yard unless I'm in violation of my HOA covenants. So aren't I just accelerating this process towards HOA governed neighborhoods and micro little dictatorships? Sorry, HOAs. Aren't I accelerating that process with this?
I don't think so, but I mean, everybody's got to write their own opinion. Again, I don't see it that way myself.
I'm going to disagree and just let you know. I think you're going to end up the unintended consequence of this. If you look down the road with the way this is written, I think we're just going to have a whole bunch of HOAs all over the state moving forward.
10. Who's 10? Down on the front, Patty.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I too am a former county commissioner down in Taylor County. So I know we've had a lot of discussion about this bill, but just explain to me exactly how this legislation is going to impact Taylor County, Georgia. Somebody trying to build a home in Taylor County, Butler, or Reynolds, very small communities. How is this bill going to impact them? What does this bill really mean for that area?
It'll give consumer choice. You know, I can't say every county, but counties have some of them have small building departments, maybe building inspectors, or they use a building inspector that sometimes will cover 2 or 3 counties. They'll hire out from another county. So you still have the safety factor, but what we're looking at right now, this doesn't have anything to do with safety, it's more aesthetics. And where do we draw the line between aesthetics and safety, and how do we give those people those private property rights, those consumer choice rights? But I would hope if you add aesthetics to it, it kind of pushes up the price of the house. we do a great job in Georgia of attracting industry here, and we do a good job of supplying a workforce, but can the workforce find an affordable house nearby where they're working, or are they traveling 1 or 2 counties over to get to that job? So in the whole big scheme of things, I'd hope this would help in some small way hold that workforce housing price down, where these maybe young couples or singles can find those homes to work close to their business.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Bentley, I read an article this morning, and the title of it was "Affordable Housing in Many Rural Communities is Declining at an Alarming Rate." And what it was talking about was, beside the jobs not being there for younger people, the housing affordability is not there for younger people, and they're moving out of rural Georgia. So it's, I don't foresee this bill messing with anything in Elbert County, and I really don't know if it's gonna mess anything in Taylor County. But, you know, that's a problem that's in, it's not just Georgia, it's in all of America right now. 20? That's you, Miss Susan. Okay.
I wondered when you were going to get to me. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This bill just tugs at my heart, and I know we've talked about it and we debated it for a long time. And I don't have that much to say about it other than coming from 12 years in local government. You know, local governments, commissioners and council members and like to feel like they are the voice of their citizens, and they want local control. And the last thing that local officials want is the state coming in, giving them any kind of guidelines at all. Now, I know there are lots of different ways to look at this bill, but I do know that, I mean, I've got a list here of over maybe 40 to 50 cities and counties that do not like this bill at all. I'm sure there are many, many more cities and counties who don't. They just happen not to be on the list. But I've been so proud of Ag Committee I've been on this committee now for 10 years, and I'm very proud of the work this Ag Committee's done. We have looked after our farms, we've looked after our dairies, we've looked after our woodlands. I encourage you to please think hard about this, and let's look after our small cities and small villages now. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Sam, are you 18?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just curious if DCA was here, if they could maybe just briefly talk about the amendment process and how long it takes and how that works, if that would help anybody, if that was okay.
I don't know if there's anybody from DCA, is it?
Yeah. Seth.
Good morning. I'm Kyle Hood. I'm the director of the Community Development Division, one office of which is the Office of Construction Codes, and Ted Miltiades is the director of that office. So if there's any particular questions about the process, the codes amendment process, as I understand, we'll be glad to ask what answer any questions that you have about procedures, if you have specific ones.
I guess is it 60-day time limit? Is that correct, or what's the average? I guess do you take 60 days on all of them, or do you have an average of 30, or what? How long does it?
Well, we don't get very many, so it turns around very quickly. Probably just a couple of weeks.
Okay, could you just maybe walk through that real quick? How that would work with this bill in place? What would happen?
State amendments that would amend the code for the entire state have to go through the State Codes Advisory Committee, which is a 21-member advisory committee. Local code amendments do not actually go through the whole advisory committee. That's just, some people get that a little bit confused. Those just come to the staff, and then we have 60 days to review those local code amendments. We request, what code are you amending? Are you amending the residential code, plumbing code, building code, et cetera, and what code section? So when they do that, then we go and identify, and then we look at those areas, topographical, climate they talked about, And we can either say yes, no, or have no comment. But regardless of what the state says at the staff level, the city or county can go and overrule it and pass it either way. So really the local government still has the control.
Thank you.
Who is 16? Okay.
I'm sorry, sometimes I'm slow, and I'm not sure I understood that last bit. So the local government can override DCA's decision on?
Recommendation, that is correct. It says in the law, even if DCA says no, we don't think this is a good idea, they can go back to the city council or the county commission and they can vote to override what the state says.
So if my city council decides they want a building standard that says, I think I'm going to use a real world example I heard last year. If a city, not my city, but a city says we want no slab construction, everything has to be on a basement. They bring that to you. You say that's not geologic, it's not ecologic, it's aesthetic. So we're going to recommend against it.
Is that Oconee County?
I believe it is.
Yeah, actually something that did come to us, but they did not identify what code. We asked, what code are you amending?
Well,
and what section? And if they don't do that, then it's not a code question. That becomes something different. And
okay.
And I remember that coming to us, and we said, well, what code are you amending? And they could not identify, so they did it another way. They went through the zoning law and changed that and put that regulation in. See, they found another way to do it.
So even if this bill becomes law, cities are still going to be able to do whatever they want?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say that if they're going to amend the code, they have to identify what code they're amending and what code section. If they go another way through their zoning law, that has no impact on what we do at the codes program at DCA.
So one of the outs for them to get around this process is to come to you all and say, can we amend our local? A bureaucrat at that point makes a decision, your staff makes a decision that this is a no-go. It goes back to them and they say we're going to do it anyway?
They have to take a vote of their city council or county commission, and if they do, they can vote to do it. They have local control, home rule state.
Even if it doesn't meet one of the four conditions in current law 8-2-25, climactic, geologic, topographic, or public safety?
That would be my opinion, but the city attorney or the county attorney would be the one to make that, I think, final decision on advising that city or county on how to proceed.
One last question.
Yes, sir.
If the county attorney says let's go for it, or the city attorney says let's go for it, is there any ramifications or negative impacts, or is there any way to hold the city accountable if they're actually in violation?
DCA is not a regulatory agency. Interpretation of the code, enforcement of the code lies solely with the local government. We make the law at DCA regarding the construction codes, just like y'all make the law on many, many other things, but we don't enforce or interpret or administer the law. That's pretty clear in the Uniform Codes Act.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dominic?
Oh, boy. Representative Smith, one of the things we talk about, y'all hold tight, because one of the things we talk about up here a lot is striking that balance. And I have noticed that in regards to what the state is responsible for and what our local governments are responsible for, more times than not, the balance is don't touch anything locally. That's it. Don't look at local governance. Don't bring it up in conversation. But we have a tremendous responsibility here to take on some of these very controversial differences of who is responsible for what. So would it be fair to say, since last year when we first started talking about this legislation, you have moved towards the local governments in the way that this bill is written?
I'd agree with that statement.
It looks like it to me. And so, given the fact that you still have the opportunity to go before the code revisions, I heard someone say that that's a bureaucratic person making that decision. Those are people from the industry helping make that decision. Am I right? From concrete and wood and from different areas that have a position on that.
Well, I have to distinguish now. If we're doing a state amendment to the state code that applies to the whole state it has to go through the 21-member advisory committee. And then it's applicable all over the state.
And those 21 members are made up of?
The home builders, engineers,
There you go.
architects.
Those aren't bureaucrats.
No, those aren't. But
Okay.
if you're doing just a local amendment to a particular city or county, it doesn't go to that 21-member advisory committee. That's just a staff process.
And that's when you go up, down, or no recommendation.
Yes, sir.
So there you go. And then you can still implement that. You don't necessarily have, but it is a much more transparent, open, public conversation. And then the people that live in those communities can say, you just went against their recommendation. They said no, but you went yes anyway. That's the property owners having the information they need to decide who to elect to help make those decisions. And one of the challenges has been, because of the way development takes place, it's not really on the radar of your everyday citizen. So they're not aware of some of these ordinances and everyday decisions being made on investment. And I believe, Representative Smith, I think you've struck a very careful balance on this, and we try to do that in everything that we do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dominic. I'm gonna do 17, whoever that is, and then we got some people that wanna say something one way or the other.
Mr. Chairman,
and
I
then
just
we'll come back.
wave off. I want to go on record that Dominic actually asked the question that I was going to ask, or the comment, first time ever. So.
With all due respect.
So Nat country folks think alike, is that what? We got about 5 people that want to talk, and if y'all could kind of line up, I don't want to lose people to another meeting. If you'd come to the podium up here, please. And I can't read half of this writing. Mayor Lynn DeAsh, is that it?
Yeah.
And then Charlotte and Todd. I know Charlotte wrote this because I can read it. And then Sarah, I can't read the last name, and then Michelle Bencava and Kyle Wingfield. If y'all would kind of tell us who you are and talk fast, please.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I am Mayor Lynn Deutsch, and I represent the great city of Dunwoody. And I am here to speak about this bill. And I want to make a point that I think has gotten lost, and DCA didn't make it, which is when all the cities in Georgia and counties in Georgia, when we adopt our comprehensive land use plans, our zoning ordinances, have rezonings, et cetera, we are required to advertise and have public hearings and public meetings. We are going through our comprehensive master plan rewrite as we speak, and we have citizens that are required to have citizens on that committee. When a rezoning happens, we're required to advertise, including signs on the property. Our citizens have input in every zoning decision we make, from the original adoption of the zoning requirements and ordinances to rezonings. And I trust our citizens not only to share their values with us in terms of development, but also to hold us accountable. I see my constituents everywhere I go within my cities, and I think most local officials are the same. And what works in my community may not work in another, and one size does not fit all in Georgia. And I'm going to tell you, I was listening to the speakers from DCA and the questions from y'all, and I think the people that are going to benefit the most from this are construction attorneys, because it is unclear to me what they just said. Because if what they're saying is true, is if I can ignore what DCA says and I can ignore this law, then why have it? So if I can go back and DCS says you can't say that they can't use siding, and we say, but we want to, and we have a motion and we vote to approve it, then the developer is going to sue us because we're not following the state law that says we can't regulate aesthetics. And as far as DCA, it's the equivalent of y'all passing a law, or the Congress passing a law and saying y'all have to do it, or you have to appeal to a committee at the federal level. Y'all wouldn't like that very much. Local government works because our constituents interact with us on a daily basis. I have lots of thoughts about how we can solve workforce housing. Real estate prices are driven by land cost and location. And if you allow, and for the record, the city of Dunwoody doesn't regulate aesthetics. None of what is in this bill is something that we address except in zoning conditions that are agreed to with the developer. We don't have any ordinances that say how many windows you have, what the rooms layouts have to be. We have none of that. I agree with the comments about HOAs, and more than just new communities, communities that have let their HOAs lapse can go back and invest in their HOAs and restart them. I think we can find balance by perhaps changing the citizen requirement. If you're convinced that citizens are demanding these changes, make it harder for us to get our comprehensive plan rewrites through, make up the have DCA up the requirements for citizen involvement. There are lots of ways to make sure our citizens' voices are being heard, but dictating aesthetics regulations and frankly other zoning regulations is not the way to address the housing crisis in the state of Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Charlotte.
Thank you, Chairman McCall, members of the committee. I'm Charlotte Davis with the Georgia Municipal Association. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to House Bill 937. Representative Vance Smith is well aware of our opposition at GMA and ACCG, and House Bill 937 would prohibit local governments from regulating any building material, any building product, directly or indirectly from any single-family home. To put this simply, this bill, much like House Bill 302 that was debated in this committee last session and moved through the Ag Committee, takes power away from citizens to decide the individual look and feel of each community in the state of Georgia. House Bill 937 does reference the item 4, this local amendment process. We've talked a little bit about it. However, we believe that this is a false option. It's not an opportunity. Residential building design standards for aesthetic purposes would not be allowed. The only building code amendments currently allowed to the state minimum standard code, and we've heard there, those 4 factors. It's climate, topography, geology, and public safety factors. Like Representative Vance Smith said, though, we're talking about aesthetic design standards. This does not have anything to do with building safety. It's not a question for the code. Architectural design standards would therefore not be considered as an amendment, and this would effectively wipe out any local ordinance, comprehensive plan, or housing plan that's been established by each municipality in the state locally. House Bill 937 removes the ability of the citizens to work with their neighbors, to go to zoning board hearings, to work with their planning commissions, to participate on steering committees, to decide the individual look and feel of the community that they live in. This legislation cuts to the core of home rule. It erodes local control of the locally elected officials working in concert with their citizens that elected them to make these decisions locally. And for us, we have grave concern with that. This does not protect a resident's investment in their home because they couldn't ensure what future development in their neighborhoods looked like if this bill were to pass. But it does ensure a race to a minimum standard, and it sets a floor and also a ceiling. The processes that are in place locally, we believe, are the best. We believe that every community should be left to decide whether architectural design standards are appropriate or not for their communities, and the local elected officials will work with their citizens to make sure that they're representing those needs adequately. But we don't believe that the legislation before you is an appropriate measure for the state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Todd.
Todd Edwards with the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I won't be long. I think Charlotte, my colleague at the Georgia Municipal Association, summed it up where well we share the same concerns at ACCG. I'll just address and reiterate on a couple of questions and asked and a couple of points made. It was earlier, it prohibits a construction practice in the legislation. Unless we go through the process at DCA through the advisory council. But in order to get to that process to begin with, whatever we do above the state minimum codes, we have to argue that it's based solely on local climatic, geologic, topographic, or public safety factors. I'm concerned if this bill passes, all the aesthetic conditions that don't pertain specifically to one of those 4 factors are a non-starter, and we go back to it being prohibited as a construction practice. That is of great concern to the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. Over 30 counties in the state have some sort of design standards. They develop these, as mentioned by the mayor, through a public process at the local governing level. There is participation, there's transparency, and there is openness, and these are not always tough decisions to go through. Some counties, often many counties, in fact, don't ever adopt design standards. Some of them do. But again, that's a decision we believe should remain at the local government level. I could go on, but I think y'all's questions have been good on the point. I think we've expressed our position on this. I thank you for your time and consideration, and either one of us will be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Sarah?
Good morning. My name is Sarah Patnod. I'm one of the 1,100 members of the Georgia Planning Association. We were opposed to House Bill 302, and we're opposed to this bill as well. As planners, we work every day with local communities to develop plans for the local communities. These codes are exactly how those visions made by the people are implemented in their communities. And by taking away the ability for communities to implement those visions, you're saying that all of the work that goes into them doesn't matter, and all of those public voices that are heard are less important than the voices of the construction industry that is driving this bill. Those local visions are how we highlight and enhance the local character and the sense of place and community. Think about the beautiful places that we have in Georgia and how much character they have. Think about Helen if it didn't have design standards to give it the feel that is Helen, Georgia. Moreover, this DCA amendment process is a steep climb for the small local communities. We have over 400 local communities with less than 5,000 people. And instead of being able to handle that process internally for the people that it affects, you're now making them go through an onerous bureaucratic process. And as it's been addressed multiple times, it limits what they're able to do. Furthermore, as somebody who works every day trying to build affordable housing in Georgia, the aesthetics is not what is making housing unaffordable. If you're really concerned about affordable housing, you're in luck. Today is actually Housing Day at the Capitol, and there are many, many people in the affordable housing industry who would love to come talk to you about the things that would help make affordable housing, especially in our rural communities. In fact, the head of Georgia ACT is here today. I'm sure she would love to talk to you about growing up in Cordele and the problems that Cordele faces with affordability. It's not the design standards that are the regulations driving housing prices up. Regulation is a big piece of what makes housing less affordable, but those are safety standards. I don't want to put the people who live in my community into substandard housing. It's more important to me that we think about other ways that we can handle our affordable housing needs because it is real and it is growing. But House Bill 937 is not going to have anything to do with that. So I encourage you to reach out to your local communities, talk to your planners, find out about the ways and reasons why these design standards are being built, because you'll find out that this bill is going to only hinder the community's ability to vision what it is that they want to be. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Michelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. The folks that have gone before me have said such wonderful things, so I'm not going to repeat any of that. I just want to talk from a local authority that has a very limited design standards, and some of which have zero cost to the builder or very negligible. Chairman McCall told a story last year about delivering something to his daughter's friend's grandmother in a neighborhood where every single house looked identical. And thankfully, GPS got you out of the neighborhood, if you remember correctly.
That's right.
We actually have standards that don't cost the builder or the developer anything, that prevent duplicate cookie cutter housing, because that's what our community has spoken into. We don't want every single house to look alike. You can switch a gable, you can move the garage to the other side, you can change the paint color because we don't care what color you paint your house. All of those things are put in place to really look out for the community's interest and the property values for the existing properties around it. Personal property rights are important for the person selling and for the person that is invested in that community for a very long time, maybe generationally, who are looking at woods now, and they have a great view that's going to change. And we just have an opportunity at a local authority to sort of guide the character of the community. I love to go to Savannah. I don't want to live in Savannah, but I would not want Tucker and Savannah to look exactly the same. I don't think that it should be we limiting choices by homogenizing the way that housing looks across the state. It's a great state to do business. People come here, they have choices to where they want to locate their business and where they want to buy houses. I can't choose to live anywhere I want because there are cost concerns, but I have plenty of choices in the state of Georgia. And I think there should continue to be variability and access. We care about, I know I'm going really fast because I want to say a lot, but we also care at the local level about workforce housing. And 1 square mile on Mountain Industrial Boulevard, we have 9,000 jobs. 9,000 jobs in 1 square mile. And that's just one of our CIDs. So we absolutely pay attention to and think about our zoning and our codes when it comes to where people can live. We have houses being built right now for $180,000, houses being built for $500,000 in our community. And we think carefully about every decision. And just the last thought I'll say, our very first big zoning case as a city, thank you, sir, we actually had, it was so controversial over zoning that we lost a council member over it. They were voted out, and the community was loud and clear that they didn't agree with her vote on it, and it was quick. And in one cycle, she was out of there. So the people are paying attention, and they do have a mechanism to replace folks that they think have gone too far with anything in their local government. So I would ask you, please, with all due respect to Representative Smith, I don't see the point in this if it really can be overruled, but I don't believe that it can be overruled. I believe we will actually be hobbled by this, and we will start to create a very homogeneous looking Georgia. So thank you very much.
Thank you for talking fast. Kyle?
Did you want me to say it again slower? Or is
Okay. We're good. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kyle Wingfield, president of the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. I appreciate the invitation to be with you here this morning. As you may know, the foundation does not support or oppose specific legislation, but we've long been troubled by the practices of some local governments to restrict the private property rights of their citizens through the use of these design standards. The study committee that Representative Smith referenced earlier looked at a lot of the factors behind the shortage of workforce, affordable housing in many types of communities, really all types of communities in our state. And we believe it did a good job of outlining those reasons. Some of those, land, labor, lumber, things that you can't necessarily do something about. But the fourth L from that report was laws. And while it's true that there are lots of different types of laws that have an impact on the cost of housing, we do believe that these particular types of laws are one of those factors, and they're not an insignificant factor. We are undertaking a project to quantify this in an aggregated way for the state, but we do know anecdotally that for many of these types of restrictions, it's very obvious that the restricted practice or material is less expensive than the one that is being mandated, and therefore we do believe it has a substantial impact on the price of housing. I do want to speak to a few of the issues that have been raised today. In terms of the will of the people, I don't know how something can be more reflective of the will of the people than what the people are allowed to do with their own property. That is a fundamental right. We do see different levels of government that protect fundamental rights when another level of government is not doing a sufficient job of that. There are certain federally protected rights that the state does not have the purview to influence, and we believe that private property rights is the kind of fundamental right that no level of government should be able to infringe upon. There's nothing more local than one's own property, and at issue here, of course, is the control of that. And the same goes for home rule, which in this case is literally a question of who makes the rules about a person's home. I would also point out that one of the issues with these aesthetic design standards is that it may be a case of that being the preference of the community or a subset of the community that makes the rules for a time, but those preferences can be fleeting. They can be here today and gone tomorrow, and we believe that the better protection for private property rights is for the owner of that property to be able to make the decisions about how they're going to use it. So that concludes my remarks. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kyle. Vance, real fast wrap up, and then I'd entertain a motion if it's one to be made.
Number one, this isn't a zoning bill.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, number one, I don't consider this a zoning bill. It's, like you said, the word's been used, aesthetics. If you add windows to a home, it costs money. If you have different roof styles, additional roof styles or planes of the roof, and I'm not a contractor, that seems to me that would cost money. So I just, I'll put it to the will of the committee. I think we've heard a lot of great testimony. People are passionate about their areas of the state, and I live in a rural area of the state too, Pine Mountain, Georgia. So I'll leave this to the will of the committee, but I certainly would appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Vance. And Vance is, I've seen some emails back and forth from people to Vance, and I want to commend you for being nice. You've been way nicer than I would have been.
Thank you,
in
Mr. Chairman.
answering some of those emails that people accused you of everything but being a child of God. So, anyway.
I'd accept that one if they.
Is there a motion on 937, Tom? Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see a very delicate balance between property rights and design standards and everything we're looking at, and therefore I'd like to make a motion we table this bill at this time.
I got a motion table on the floor. All in favor of table say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. I'm going to say the noes have it. If you want a hand count, tell me. All right. Anybody else got anything? Motion up or down?
Move to pass.
Got a do pass in a second. All in favor of do pass, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. Y'all want a hand count? Yes. All right. All in favor of do pass House Bill 937, raise your hand. Somebody, David, you counting? Hold your hands up again, he's recounting. Got it? All opposed, same. $13 and what? 10. Oh, thank goodness it ain't a tie. All right, 13 to 10, do pass. Is that okay with everybody? All right. Thank y'all for sitting through this. Thank y'all, everybody that came and talked. House Bill 966. Where is and James, House Bill 966. You got copies, Lee? All right. There was a slight change from what the original was in your folder. It really ain't nothing, but anyway, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee, for allowing me to present House Bill 966 to you today. What this bill is it's a somewhat of a regulation on a budding industry. It has to do with palmetto berries, and just so I cover everything, I'm not sure everybody even knows what a palmetto berry is, but it is it's a volunteer bush that grows down in South Georgia, and it has a small berry on it that the berry has some medicinal values. And the value has continued to rise recently. And what we're seeing in South Georgia is busloads of pickers being dropped off on people's private property and essentially stealing these berries. And the problem with what we have now, we've already got trespassing and theft laws, but the problem with those laws is almost impossible to prosecute or catch these folks doing it because they're doing it under the cover of darkness or early in the morning. So what this bill will do, are my P's also cutting this thing out? All right. So what this bill will do will regulate the possession, the harvesting, and the sale of the palmetto berry throughout the supply chain. It stiffens the penalties for anybody that's caught harvesting berries without a what we're calling a harvest certificate. And what the harvest certificate is simply permission from the landowner. It's a very simple or low threshold. So you go and you get a written permission from your landowner owner, and you have to have that with you while you're harvesting, while you're transporting, and when you're buying and selling. And that's essentially what this bill does. I'll entertain any questions from the committee, and I appreciate your favorable consideration.
You know, we wasn't going to do this today, but somehow all of the Southeast Georgia delegation really wanted this to be your first bill. I don't know exactly why.
I'm not sure either, Mr. Chairman.
I think it had something to do with the uses of palmetto berries. We have a couple of folks that want to talk, Tom Bayer and Sean. I can't read Sean's last name either. What? Okay, well, y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom Bayer with the Georgia Forestry Association. I'll keep my remarks very brief since committee's already taken enough time. And Sean actually has an on-the-ground perspective on this issue. Georgia Forestry Association has the honor of representing the #1 forestry state, and a core principle of ours is protection of private property rights, and this touches exactly that and is a growing issue in southeast Georgia and Representative Burchett's district. We appreciate the committee taking this up, and we strongly support House Bill 966. Thank you all for the opportunity to testify, and I'll turn it over to Sean now, who can give a more on-the-ground perspective.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Sean Derome, and I'm a business development manager with Rainier, Inc. We're a timber real estate investment trust with significant holdings in the state of Georgia. We own over just about 700,000 acres in the state and about 2.8 million acres across the U.S. Southeast, Pacific Northwest, and New Zealand. This palmetto berry issue, we're really glad that it's something that's come up. We are in favor of it. Florida has some legislation that they passed in 2018, and we've seen a 49% increase in revenue from our palmetto berry business since that bill has been passed. Our Georgia ownership consists of over 3,100 miles of property boundaries, so it's nearly impossible for us to monitor those at all times, as you can imagine. Because of that, we'd like to see some of this being pushed so that we can have some stronger regulations and see less theft on our properties. We've estimated that we've had about half of our berries stolen in South Georgia, so this is going to be a significant impact on us and our business. With the significant headwinds that we're facing right now with timber pricing in the state and the region, this will be also be a big help for us and the industry as a whole. Thank you very much, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Robert, is your question for James or Sean?
I got a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing this bill. You know, palmetto, those of us that grow some other things have trouble with folks stealing peaches and pecans up there. And so this might be a good framework. I might want to see an amendment adding peaches and pecans on this thing, too, for stealing that. But this kind of puts those things in a whole another classification. But anyway, that's all I was going to say, Mr. Chairman. It's thank you.
All right, 16. Scott, that's you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I apologize. In preparing for this morning, I was working off the bill that was online, and as you came to the table, a substitute was dropped right in front of me, and I haven't had time to thoroughly digest the substitute. Can you just briefly go over the differences between the substitute and the original language, please?
Yes, sir. I apologize for that not being to you sooner, but yesterday this identical bill went through the Senate Ag Committee and Natural Resources Committee, excuse me. And on lines 104 and 105, there was some ambiguous language that essentially was too broad, and what it would do was say that if a person was picking for personal use, then they could essentially pick wherever they want. So what we did is change that language to add the landowner language in there. So the intent of that line is to say that if you're a landowner and you're picking on your own property, you don't need to get a certificate for if it's for personal use.
Thank you.
The only change is 104.
Thank you.
18.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being a farmer in the state and always looking for something else to grow and make money, you mentioned that the value had risen, but you didn't tell us what has caused that to happen and what are the uses of this product that have caused the value to rise? What's making it so valuable?
There, like I said, there are some medicinal purposes for the palmetto berry, primarily for the prostate. It is apparently it is effectively the only naturally grown substance that
that regulates and increases the health of the male prostate.
Thank you, Mr.
Dominic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So kind of follow up to that, and the prostate helps control what? I want to make sure we're not getting off into local control on the what the body does. But so if you'd elaborate a little bit on what the prostate does and how that helps with medicinal purposes. But I did want to ask this too: if you've ever walked through the woods in South Georgia where there's a lot of planted timber, it's hard to really know where one property stops and another property starts, and that's a serious question because of trespassing. And are there posting? Currently are there laws about posting of properties? Because you have tens of thousands of acres, in many cases thousands of acres of contiguous properties. They may have written permission on property A, and because I'm serious, it all looks the same, and they inadvertently cross over. Is there some requirements that the landowner has to properly post property?
I can only speak vaguely about the law that requires you to post trespass property. And as I understand it, you are required to make a case of trespassing. One, you have to catch them trespassing, and then you have to have notice up on your property to do so. And that's really just if they're doing it in the middle of the night and you got 12,000 acres, how are you going to catch these folks on your property? So that's a problem. But I think that's another issue separately. To your first question. I'm not a medical doctor. I cannot give you a succinct answer as to what exactly all the prostate does, but it does have some impact on the male. I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to say. I'll be honest with you. But just to that question, I wanted to say that. In our penalties, we did include a knowingly and unknowingly degree. So if you know you're on somebody else's property and you know you're harvesting berries illegally, then the penalty is a bit stiffer than if you unknowingly are on somebody else's property.
Emery, are you number 11?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, two of the guys ahead of me had a little bit of the question I was going to ask on the prostate. But I understand this from personally, I own mountain property up in northeast Tennessee, and there's a product called ginseng. And people were coming and harvesting this, and when I would be up at these cabins up around Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, Townsend, that area, I realized how serious this was when you caught someone that you knew were poaching and stealing your product. And I mean deadly. It was that bad. And of course, I don't like a challenge too often, but I don't mind one. And then I had chestnuts. Well, I had people would come and start picking chestnuts, and I'm like, I own this property. What are you doing? We just want some chestnuts. And then a neighbor down below my farm grows field corn. And one day he's talking to me, he says, every night at a full moon, people are coming in and going down 10 rows and stealing my field corn. And I understand this. I really do. I was going to have a little bit more of the other questions the two gentlemen before me asked, but this is something I appreciate you bringing the bill. And we can get field corn, ginseng, and some of the others to do what this does, we'll be happy.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question on line 82, it seems as though the director, being the director of the Georgia Forestry Commission or local law enforcement, is given the authority to enforce the statute should it pass. Does the Forestry Commission have that authority currently to enforce such actions?
This was part of the Senate bill that we merged into this. I don't know that they do not have it already, but I think it's always better to go ahead and spell out to include these guys to do that. I would say that they do already have the authority, because right now they're making cases. They're just harder to make against folks that are on state property.
But on private property, I mean, are we going to distinguish whether it's harvested on state property or private property in this case? I mean, I've got a little bit of a concern about the Forestry Commission and whether or not they have the legal authority to make such actions against a harvester of the berries, is my question. Director Williams may be able to provide some clarity to that. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Chuck Williams, Director of the Georgia Forestry Commission. We have been involved along with the sponsor of the bill and the Georgia Forestry Association since this issue first came up. And actually, we're not immune. On our Dixon Memorial State Forest down in Ware County, a 30-something thousand acre parcel of land, we deal with these same issues of palmetto berry theft. We currently, as you may know, under the code section, we have specific authority on timber theft and timber arson. And the thinking was that this fit well under there, because under timber theft also there is a subsection of the code that deals with pine straw theft and chain of custody. So really this effort would very much mimic what's already on the books for pine straw, for documentation and that type thing. Our specific discussion was that we did not need or want the only sole authority to enforce this. We have a 5-member law enforcement division that is stretched thin as is, so we made sure when the bill was being put together that it fit under that code section, but basically it was open to general law enforcement. Our law enforcement officers are post-certified. They can make charges for any law that's on the books of the state of Georgia, but again, we're not seeking by any stretch sole authority under this bill.
But you do have the authority.
We have the authority now with post-certified officers to make an arrest for somebody stealing hubcaps, Mr. Chairman, or pine straw or timber or whatever with post-certified officers. But again, we would not have sole authority under this, but we would have the same authority that any other post-certified officer would have in the state. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, two right quick that you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question just to help me get my mind around this, if maybe you could answer this, and it's kind of 30,000-foot view, pretty easy, but how's this bill going to stop or prevent the problem of criminal trespass and theft just in general that's not already enforceable by the current laws in the books?
Well, that's a good question, and I think by specifically enumerating the palmetto berry and calling it out in our law, it's going to make it easier for our law enforcement officers to make a case against someone that they find. The best place to catch these folks is not in the woods, because as one of my landowners said, he's got evidence they were 3 miles from any road into his property stealing these berries. So the best place to catch these folks is in transit. So this would make it illegal to have berries in Georgia in transit from the woods to the point of sale without having that certificate from the landowner.
One follow-up, if I might. How's that any different, as the commissioner said, to even pine straw, though? We don't do the same thing with pine straw, and do we?
Yes, the pine straw code is on the books. As the pine straw business has expanded, it is more or less self-policing now. The pine straw code was put on there back when pine straw was a cottage industry. So we don't see many problems with it because of the value of pine straw and so many people watching it, but it would be the same principle.
Okay, so we apply the law through transit. And
yes, and Mr. Chairman, if I could, we had the same thing back several years ago when we passed HB 790, the timber theft bill. It was already a crime to steal timber, but in particular, the prosecuting counsel world was hesitant to to prosecute timber theft under the general theft codes. When we put it under a specific code, it causes them to show much more interest in prosecuting those. We think the same thing will happen with palmetto berries, basically having their own code section rather than just being dealt with as any piece of physical property.
Don?
Mr. Chairman, proper time, I'd like to make a motion.
That'd be a real good time.
I make a motion to pass.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Oh, no. Y'all satisfied?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good luck on this being your first bill on the floor. You saw some of the questions. While you sitting there, do 897, please, sir. It ought not take long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, again, committee, for allowing me to present to you House Bill 897. What this bill is a uniformity bill for the timber harvesting industries. It creates a website that all timber harvesters will eventually be able to notice through. It limits their current bond usage by any of the municipalities or counties, and it creates an appeals process and also punishes bad actors. The problem that we're trying to fix here is that when this piece of legislation was originally passed, it was intended to be a notice statute where a timber harvester comes into a county and all they are required to do is give notice to the county that will be cutting timber in their county. It has had the effect of some counties maybe requiring permits and some other requirements that were not necessary. For instance, one county was charging $1 per acre harvested, and some of them were interpreting it as a permit statute where they had to apply for a permit, and that was not the intent of the legislation. So this puts a ceiling on what the counties and cities could require of the timber harvesters. That's essentially what this bill does. I'll take any questions from the committee.
Does anybody have any questions about this one? Motion would be good. Got a motion, second, do pass. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Thank you. And look, on that last one, it needs to be do pass by substitute. You know, where we changed line 104. All right, we got one more, Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for waiting. And while Marcus is setting up, today is Georgia Green Industry Day at the Capitol. They will be giving y'all all a little purple oxalis. Try to water it and keep it alive till you get it home, and it is a perennial, which means you ain't got to dig but one hole ever. So anyway, go ahead, Marcus.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And committee, I'm bringing forward you House Bill 928 LC 392525. This time of year, the Secretary of State's office starts getting inundated with phone calls about a letter that goes out. It looks like a government document. Requesting or instructing you that you have to renew your corporate registration with the Secretary of State's office to the cost of $150. Problem is, it's not a government document. It looks a lot like one. We had a similar bill this couple of years ago with property deeds. What this bill would do is require that solicitation at the top of it to read, "This is not a bill or official government document. This is a solicitation." It is a service that you can use, but the Secretary of State's office, obviously, you can go straight to their website and do it for a third of that cost at $50. This service is put out there unknowingly to a lot of people, kind of preying upon them. It's a consumer protection bill, but I'm happy to answer any questions about it if anybody has any.
Does anybody have any? 18? Sam?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick. As it relates to the fair business practices, could you tell me what the sign reads above the Chinese shopkeeper's door?
No cheating here.
Glad to read. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Patty? I reckon that's you, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will we hear any comments from the Secretary of State office on this piece of legislation?
There is a representative here if you'd like.
Okay. Yes.
We're in full support of this legislation. As a matter of fact, we're grateful for Representative Wiedauer bringing this forward. This is a consumer protection issue. A number of members have reached out to me on the issue, and we asked Representative Wiedauer if he would take care of it.
Okay. Because I do recall receiving something in the mail, and it was for $150 for the registration, and I knew that I could go online and do it through the Secretary of State office. And I wondered about that, how many more business owners in my community will probably receive that and think this is what they need to do and be scammed or something. So
It gets very confusing, and this is, hopefully we'll just clear that up.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And Representative, this is not necessarily illegal, but it's totally deceptive.
Correct. We're not trying to say that somebody might find the service very useful. We just want people to know that it is not the state requesting that, and it is not a state fee. We want them to know they are using a service.
And if they in fact want to use it, they still
They are
can,
more
or
than welcome
they
to use
can
that
go
service.
Save $100 and go straight to Sam and
Yes,
then
sir.
the website.
But if it's worth it, if they want to spend the $100, they're welcome to do it.
All right, that'd be a real good time, Dominic. Okay, all right, go ahead, Pat.
Would you be willing to come to the room 230 on Friday for the Georgia Funeral Service practitioners? The funeral directors will be here on Friday and share this information on Friday.
I would love to stop by.
Thank you.
You better be careful. They'll take your pulse when you're in there. Go ahead, Dominic. Got a motion? Second? Somebody second? Do pass. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Thank y'all very much for sitting through another long meeting. Maybe we're done with Vance, and meeting's adjourned.